In the snowy landscape, the weather was clear. Dark days were coming. Cold, limited harvests, and storage failures defined survival, as stillness enclosed farms across Europe. Short summers constrained calories, forcing farmers to maximize preserved harvest before snow-sealed fields and halted growth entirely for months across northern medieval landscapes each year. Reduced daylight shortened labor windows, limiting fieldwork before winter closure, and forcing tasks into compressed schedules with little margin for weather delays or illness during autumn. Thin soils restricted yields, making efficient nutrient recycling essential through manure, spreading fallowing, and careful residue management to sustain harvests over generations without soil collapse locally. Hardy grains survived cold soils, offering reliable calories under stress when temperatures dropped and rains delayed germination, ensuring some yield despite environmental unpredictability each season regionally. Barley matured quickly, tolerating poor weather and marginal farmland, where shorter growing cycles favored early ripening cereals over higher yielding but fragile crops like wheat varieties. Rye resisted frost, growing where wheat consistently failed, making it essential in colder uplands and sandy soils despite its darker bread and lower status among elites. Oats fed livestock, indirectly sustaining humans through winter products such as milk traction manure and eventual meat, linking animal survival directly to human calories during winter. Rotations reduced soil exhaustion, stabilizing long-term food output by alternating cereals, legumes, and fallow fields, allowing nutrients and moisture to recover naturally between seasons without inputs. Animal waste restored nutrients, increasing yields without external inputs through regular spreading on exhausted plots after harvest, despite unpleasant labor and transport demands during autumn months. Families synchronized labor, maximizing productivity during brief agricultural windows as planting, harvesting, and storage overlapped tightly, leaving little room for individual delay or absence without consequences. Iron scarcity limited tools, enforcing careful maintenance and reuse, because metal production was slow, expensive, and localized, making broken implements serious threats to harvest timelines annually. Heavy plows improved soil turnover, expanding arable land gradually by cutting deeper furrows that drained excess moisture, but requiring more animals and coordinated labor from households. Seed grain required protection, competing directly with winter food supplies, since eating reserves reduced future planting capacity, forcing strict discipline despite hunger pressures, late-season shortages. Single storms could destroy harvests, demanding conservative storage strategies that assumed partial loss rather than complete success across multiple crops and preserved forms each year regionally. Early harvesting reduced spoilage risk but lowered caloric density because immature grain contained less starch per volume, creating trade-offs between safety and sustenance under pressure conditions. Moisture removal prevented mold, extending storage viability through winter by drying sheaves in barns or open racks before enclosure to limit fungal growth in cold climates. Manual threshing separated grain efficiently without complex machinery, using flails or animal treading on hard surfaces during winter when fieldwork was impossible due to snow cover. Wind separated chaff, using natural airflow to purify grain thrown from baskets in exposed yards or doorways, accepting losses during calm or damp conditions without alternatives. Elevated granaries reduced moisture, pests, and ground heat transfer by lifting stores above damp soil and rodents, while exposing contents to stabilizing cold air during winter. Physical barriers limited losses, though complete exclusion remained impossible as mice, insects, and birds adapted persistently consuming grain gradually despite human countermeasures over months of storage. Wooden bins balanced insulation, accessibility, and structural simplicity, allowing farmers to monitor supplies and remove portions without exposing entire stores to moisture or pests at once. Stable cold preserved grain better than fluctuating indoor warmth because repeated warming encouraged condensation, mold, and insects, even if temperatures stayed above freezing for periods indoors. Earth insulation moderated temperature, slowing spoilage during extended storage by buffering extremes through surrounding soil mass that changed slowly, despite surface weather variations across seasons annually. Poor drainage caused losses, demanding careful site selection to avoid water accumulation, freezing, and decay, which could ruin entire pits silently over winter without warning signs. Fermentation stabilized food, converting sugars into longer-lasting forms, such as ale-sour porridge and preserved vegetables that resisted spoilage through acidic environments during storage months later. Infrequent baking conserved fuel, relying on dense loaves that dried slowly and resisted mold longer, reducing daily fire use and labor demands in winter households throughout. Ale preserved calories, safer than water during winter months because boiling and fermentation killed pathogens, while retaining grain energy in liquid form for consumption by all. Salt scarcity restricted meat preservation to limited quantities, since salt required trade or coastal access, making heavily salted meat a controlled resource used sparingly during winter. Smoke dried flesh, inhibiting bacteria, while conserving protein through prolonged exposure to low heat and airflow that removed moisture without cooking meat completely over weeks slowly. Animal fats delivered dense calories critical during cold periods because fat metabolism generated sustained body heat, when carbohydrates alone proved insufficient for warmth in winter months. Animals required fodder, competing directly with human food needs through hay and grain reserves stored for winter, forcing difficult decisions about herd size before snowfall arrived. Summer haymaking determined livestock survival through snowbound months by cutting, drying, and stacking grasses efficiently during narrow weather windows before autumn rains or frost arrived early. Autumn slaughter reduced feed burden, but limited breeding stock, balancing immediate meat supply against future production through careful selection of animals retained each year on farms. Cheese concentrated nutrition, preserving milk beyond immediate consumption by removing water and stabilizing proteins and fats into durable forms edible months later without refrigeration or freezing. Butter spoiled quickly without cold, demanding rapid consumption or constant churning into fresh batches, making it seasonal despite its high energy value for diets in winter. Turnips and onions, stored underground, resisting freezing temperatures by remaining below frost lines, providing fresh calories late winter when grains alone cause dietary strain, locally available. Subterranean cellars exploited Earth's thermal mass for preservation, maintaining stable cold that slowed decay while avoiding lethal freezes common above-ground structures during extended winter storage periods. Excess humidity accelerated rot, requiring ventilation compromises that balanced air exchange against heat loss, since drying too much invited freezing damage within enclosed storage spaces seasonally. Controlled airflow balanced drying with protection from freezing by limiting drafts, using vents, shutters, and timing to regulate internal cellar climates during long winter storage periods. Cold reduced insects, but surviving pests consumed reserves slowly, gnawing grain and roots throughout winter, despite human vigilance and countermeasures within storage areas over many months. Measured portions, extended supplies, preventing early depletion by enforcing routine meals that matched storage capacity, rather than appetite or immediate hunger during prolonged winter scarcity periods. Workers received more calories, reflecting energy expenditure realities since labor in cold demanded greater intake to maintain body heat and productivity during sustained winter workloads seasonally. Chronic scarcity defined normality, not exceptional crisis, shaping expectations where hunger was anticipated annually rather than signaling immediate social collapse across medieval rural communities routinely endured. Communal sharing reduced individual failure, spreading collective risk through kin networks that redistributed food during shortages, preventing isolated household collapse within villages facing winter stress together. Tithes reduced reserves, increasing vulnerability during bad winters, as obligations to lords removed stored grain regardless of household survival. Needs under feudal legal structures enforced annually. Some loss was expected, factored into initial planning because spoilage theft and pests could never be fully eliminated, despite precautions taken by medieval households each winter. Tool repair replaced farming, conserving energy indoors while maintaining equipment for spring, since idle hands risked cold and resource waste during long winter confinement periods annually. Firewood use competed with cooking, limiting food processing as fuel shortages forced choices between warmth preparation and preservation tasks within households facing prolonged winter cold conditions. Stews maximize nutrients, using minimal fuel and heat by combining grains, vegetables, and fats into single vessels, simmered slowly over shared hearths during winter months regularly. Thick ceramics retained heat, reducing cooking energy requirements by maintaining simmer temperatures longer after fires were reduced within enclosed kitchens and hearths during winter fuel scarcity. Repeated reheating risked spoilage but conserved scarce fuel, forcing careful judgment between safety and survival when warming stored meals in winter households lacking constant firewood access. Meat scarcity forced reliance on grain-heavy diets, reducing protein intake over months and weakening bodies gradually through prolonged winters among rural farming populations across medieval Europe. Limited fresh produce weakened bodies before spring arrival, increasing illness susceptibility as stored foods lacked vitamins lost through drying and aging during extended winter storage periods. Reduced energy altered behavior, slowing work and response as hunger dampened motivation and increased risk during cold, demanding conditions within households managing scarcity, daily survival tasks. Snow cover protected stored crops from extreme temperature swings, adding insulation that stabilized underground pits and cellars naturally throughout prolonged winter seasons in cold regions annually. Repeated thawing broke cell structures, spoiling preserved food as ice expansion damaged roots meats and containers beyond recovery during unstable late winter weather periods seasonally recurring. Bark and acorns supplemented calories during extreme shortages, requiring laborious processing to remove toxins and make them digestible when conventional stores failed completely in famine years. Survival techniques passed orally, refined through repeated failure, as families remembered what spoiled, froze, or sustained life across generations within specific landscapes, climates, and communities historically. Local weather dictated strategies, preventing universal solutions since rainfall, frost, and soil varied enough to demand regional adaptation among medieval farming zones across Europe widely differing. Farmers adjusted methods yearly, responding to unpredictable conditions by modifying crop storage and labor allocation as experience accumulated over successive seasons of trial-error survival planning. Physical fatigue constrained how much preparation was possible, since bodies already taxed by hunger, cold, and labor could not extend indefinitely through winter months without collapse. Small buildings, limited reserves, enforcing strict prioritization because space for grain routes and tools competed within cramped farmsteads across medieval rural settlements of modest construction scale. Smell and texture identified unsafe food without instruments, relying on sensory judgment developed through experience rather than formal knowledge within households lacking medical or scientific guidance. Winter roads blocked exchange, isolating communities completely as snow mud and darkness halted carts traders and emergency assistance for months at a time each winter season. Late winter shortages peaked before new growth emerged, creating the most dangerous period when reserves were lowest and labor resumed on frozen soils awaiting spring thaw. Stored food ran lowest just before planting season, forcing families to work fields while underfed and physically weakened during early spring transitions from winter scarcity cycles. Famine deaths followed predictable seasonal patterns, rising after stores failed and before harvests restored minimal nutritional stability within agrarian populations dependent on annual cycles of yield. Minor failures cascaded, overwhelming carefully balanced subsistence systems as small losses compounded into widespread hunger and mortality during prolonged winters or successive poor harvests, years regionally. Multiple preservation methods reduced total catastrophic loss, ensuring that failure in one system did not erase all stored food within diversified medieval household survival strategies annually. Medieval farming sustained life narrowly, rarely producing excess food beyond survival needs, leaving little buffer against environmental disruption from climate shocks, warfare disease, or taxation pressures.